This is another book in the Ordinary People Change the World series. I Am Jane Goodall, written by Brad Meltzer and illustrated by Christopher Iliopoulos. I am Jane Goodall. I am Jane Goodall. On my first birthday, my dad bought me a cuddly toy chimpanzee named Jubilee. I used to carry Jubilee with me everywhere. As I got older, when I'd line up all my toys and play teacher, Jubilee was the one who had his own chair. I didn't just love my toy chimpanzee, though. I loved all animals, even the earthworms I found in the garden. My mom told me that worms would be safer in the garden, so we took them outside and buried them back in their home. At 5 years old, I was curious to learn how chickens lay eggs, so I crawled into my grandmother's hen house to watch. At first, all the hens were scared of me. Then I decided to crouch in the corner. If I had moved, the hens would have run away. I was patient, though. Finally, after all the hours of waiting, I saw what I was looking for. The hen gave a little wiggle and plop, there was an egg. It was my first research project. In addition to animals, I also love nature. I named the chestnut tree Nookie and the beechnut tree Beech. Beech was my favorite. Back then, my family didn't have a lot of money, but I loved reading. So to get books, I went to the library. When I was 7 years old, I got a book that would change my life. It was called The Story of Dr. Doolittle. I read it once. Then I read it again. Then I read it a third time before it had to go back to the library. It was about a man who could talk to animals. In the book, there's a parrot who says if you want to learn how animals talk, you need the power of observation. But what I remember most is the part where Dr. Doolittle and his animal friends were being chased, and they came to a cliff. Right there, the monkeys joined hands and feet. They became the bridge. Isn't that beautiful? We can accomplish anything by working together. After reading that book, I vowed to go to Africa and live among the animals. By the time I was 12, I had my own nature group, the Alligator Club. My friends and I raised money to help old horses. We took nature walks and wrote down what we saw, or at least I did. And if you wanted to have a high rank in the club, was I the best student? Not really. On school days, it was hard for me to wake up. I didn't like being indoors. But if we were outside or there were animals around, that's when I get excited. I wanted a job where I could learn more about animals. But back then, if you were a girl, people didn't think you could become a scientist. They expected girls to become nurses, or secretaries or teachers. I wanted to go to Africa. I wanted to study animals. Luckily, my mom always told me, if you really want something hard, work for it. If you don't give up, you'll find a way. I never forgot that. Soon I had my chance. One of my school friends invited me to visit her family in Kenya. To pay for the trip, I worked as a waitress and hid my money under the carpet. One day I closed the curtains, counted it all, and the trip took 21 days by boat. I was 23 years old. It all seemed like a dream until I saw a giraffe who stared directly at me. It had dark eyes, long lashes, a black tongue, and was chewing acacia thorns. I knew my dream was coming alive. Finally, I was in the Africa of Dr. Doolittle. Two months later, my life changed again. Someone told me, if you are interested in animals, you must meet Dr. Louis Leakey. Dr. Leakey was an anthropologist, which means he studied how humans live, and also a paleontologist, which means he studied fossils and bones. At first he hired me as a secretary, but he was quickly impressed with what I knew about animals, including his own pets. Eventually, Dr. Leakey told me about a new job studying chimpanzees up close. He said going into the forest would be hard. It would be dangerous. But if we could find out how chimps live together, we'd learn more about how our own prehistoric ancestors used to live. For a year I read everything I could about chimpanzees. I was told that women couldn't be alone in the forest. They said I needed a guide plus a companion, so my mom offered to come. I was ready. I'll never forget the day. July 16, 1960, the day I first set foot in what is today called Kombe National Park in Tanzania, Africa. At 26 years old, I had finally made it to the home of chimpanzees, and it was a place that would change my life. During one of my first explorations, we saw 2 chimpanzees eating in a tall tree. They noticed us and ran away. The next day, we didn't see any chimps. There were no chimps the day after that either. For months I'd try to get close, but they kept running away. Then I started going alone. Just me. I'd go to a high area called the Peak and look down with my binoculars. In time, I saw that the chimps would hang out in groups of 6 or fewer. The female chimps would be with the children. The male chimps would be with one another. These weren't mindless animals. This was a community. But it still took nearly a year before I could get within 100 yards of the chimpanzees. One day I came back to camp and found out one of the male chimpanzees had took all the food. I was ecstatic. That meant they were not scared anymore. The next day I waited and waited. No chimpanzees in sight. Then at 4 p.m. I heard a rustling noise by my tent. It was the large male chimpanzee with a thick beard. I called him David Graybeard. That was the name I gave him. Back then people told me there was a certain way to study animals. That I shouldn't give the chimpanzees names. They said animals were supposed to have numbers, not names. Why? They thought the animals didn't have any personalities or emotions. They thought if I gave them a name, we'd start pretending they were like us. But that... No one realized they were like us. That day, David Graybeard took my nuts and my bananas. A month later, he took one from my hand. Even later, out in the forest, he slowly approached me and checked to see if I had bananas in my pockets. It was one of my proudest moments, having the chimpanzees understand that now I wasn't a threat. I was their friend, and they were mine. Over time, by seeing the chimpanzees as individuals, I could truly understand them. David was calm, though he liked getting what he wanted. Goliath was easily excited. He was shy. Old Flo was a strong mother, always bringing her daughter and son. As I watched, one of the coolest things of all was I saw David Graybeard stripping leaves from a twig, then sticking the twig into a termite mound. Before that, scientists were the ones who thought only humans could make tools. There was no doubt now that these animals were intelligent. Every night I'd write in my journal what I had observed. Every day I saw the chimpanzees doing the same things we do. Holding hands, tickling, kissing, even patting each other on the backs to reassure each other. The more I observed, the more I learned. Soon I had so much information I needed a tape recorder. Then I needed an assistant to help observe all the other chimpanzee families in the forest. 6 years later, what started with a notepad and binoculars became a full research center. Now I was the one in charge. Today, thanks to our work in Tanzania, the whole world knows that animals have their own personalities and complex relationships. In my life, people told me there was a certain way to do things, a certain way to study animals, a certain way that girls should behave. They told me to follow the rules. Instead, I followed my gut. In your life, it will be easy to see how others are different from you. But there's so much more to gain if you instead see how alike we all are. All of us, all living things, share so much. We have so many things in common. When we realize that and look out for each other, that's the most beautiful way to live together. I am Jane Goodall, and I see so much that we have in common. Watch, observe, be patient. I'll teach you this. We don't own this earth. We share it. Listen to the feelings in your heart. We are responsible for the animals around us. We must take care of them. When one of us is in trouble, be it human, creature, or nature itself, we must reach out and help. When we do, we build a bridge that will carry all of us. I am Jane Goodall.